And I think the results may be very amazing because you wrote histories, narrations, stories, dramatic, romantic, a lot of kind of narrations we have. Who will start? Who want to start?
Ja, wir haben es nur auf Deutsch geschrieben, also ich werde es vorlesen und sie übersetzt dann danach nochmal zusammenfassen für. Also wir haben auch geschrieben, halt als Schulbucheintrag, die Ursachen des Ersten Weltkriegs liegen schon im 19. Jahrhundert und beginnen mit den angespannten diplomatischen Beziehungen zwischen fast allen europäischen Nationen, wozu die deutsch-französische Feindschaft, die Vernachlässigung der bismarckischen Bündnisse und die Aufrüstungsspirale zählten. Die Balkan- und Juli-Krise mit dem Attentat von Sarajevo und verschiedenen Verhaltensweisen fast aller europäischen Großmächte aufgrund den unterschiedlichen Zielen führten zum Ersten Weltkrieg, welcher großes Leid über alle beteiligten Nationen brachte. Mit dem Schließenplan und der Verwüstung Belgiens sowie Frankreichs entstand neben den Materialschlachten ein Stellungskrieg mit vielen modernen Massenvernichtungswaffen. Die europäischen Länder verbreiteten jeweils positive Propaganda, um die Situation besser darzustellen, obwohl die Anspannung, Familienmitglieder zu verlieren und die allgemeine Lebenssituation sich in den europäischen Ländern wie auch an der Front durch Hunger und Kälte verschlechterte. Viele Menschen verloren in diesem Krieg ihr Leben in Europa.
Okay. Originally, the First World War started in the 1900s, beginning with the diplomatic tensions between all European countries, especially Germany and France. The carelessness towards the Bismarcks and the the development of the military. Die Backen- and Juliuskreise mit the assassination in Sarajevo and the different opinions from all the European countries and the different end goals led to the First World War. The big devastation of the demolishment of Belgium and like in France, with the use of artillery and old fighting techniques and strategies. All European countries were using positive propaganda to make the situation seem better and to alleviate the stresses at home, and this changed the impression of the lives in the trenches that the people at home had, when in reality we had bad conditions and the hunger and the awful cold. Lots of people lost their lives in the World War I across Europe. There we go.
Okay, you all understand? Or shall we translate it in France? Okay.
The president of Alright.
The second group.
Yeah, okay. So, we've only got it in English, unfortunately, so there you go. In 1870, the Franco-Prussian War started, and due to that, the tension between France and Germany increased. There were tensions between the major European powers, and these were enlarged by political ambitions of the European powers, both in Europe itself and the colonies. These developments led to alliances, the Central Powers versus the Entente Powers. The assassination of Franz Ferdinand led to a conflict in the Falklands, which, through the existing alliances, started a chain reaction of war declarations that led to a European war. Due to Germany's failure to take France with the Schlieffen-Plan, it led to a stagnation of the war, which could be seen in the trench warfare. And in the First Modern War, soldiers from all over the world endured attrition warfare. When the war ended in 1918, the treaty was received as unfair by the German population, which led to long-lasting animosity after the war.
Okay, something to add?
What? As in? No, yeah, that was. Yeah. There's nothing on your side here.
It's not too short. That's a third group. Okay.
Um eine europäische Geschichte zu erzählen, sollte sich auf das gemeinsame Erleben konzentriert werden. Die hohen Verluste auf allen Seiten verbinden alle europäischen Staaten in ihrem Leid und jedes Land muss seine eigene Verantwortung am Ausbruch des Krieges erkennen und akzeptieren. Auch die in Anführungszeichen Sieger, Gewinner des Krieges verließen den Krieg ärmer und schwächer als zuvor durch den Verlust ihrer Kolonien, zerstörte Städte, massive Umweltschäden, Verschuldung und vor allem den Verlust von Menschenleben. Die Bestrafung der Verlierer führte zu mehr Hass, einem größeren Nationalismus und in Folge erneut zu einem Krieg mit noch mehr Verlusten und Verlierern.
Ich werde Ihnen heute über die Auswirkungen des Ersten Weltkriegs berichten. In der Nähe meines Hauses ist das Canadian Memorial in Vimy und Memorial Notre-Dame de Lorette. An diesem Ort entstehen durch den Ersten Weltkrieg riesige Löcher. Aufgrund des Krieges und der während des Krieges eingesetzten Bomben sind viele Boden in der Nähe meines Hauses mit Blei verseucht. Eine gesundheitsgefährdende Verschmutzung, die Bevölkerung daran hindert, diese Boden beispielsweise für die Landwirtschaft zu nutzen. Vor ein paar Jahren fanden Kinder, die in einem Wald 500 Meter von meinem Haus entfernt spazieren gingen, eine Leiche im Krieg. Dort gibt es auch viele Granaten und Kriegsreste. Es gibt auch viele alte Gräben in Frankreich, die heute zusammenbrechen und deshalb müssen die Menschen ihre Häuser verlassen.
Dankeschön.
Am Ende als positive Nebeneffekte und Folgen sowohl des Ersten als auch des Zweiten Weltkrieges können wohl die Frauenemanzipation und die europäische Einigung genannt werden, welche heute einen Grundstein für den heutigen europäischen Frieden bilden.
This was a very good last sentence. It's group 4.
Is it okay? Is it okay if it's yes, okay. Der Erste Weltkrieg war ein Krieg um Macht. Man wolle Hegemonialpolitik betreiben. Platz an der Seite. Durch den Imperialismus und Kolonialismus stieg der Drang nach Macht. Auch das nationalsozialistische Denken war ein wichtiger Akteur. Weltkrieg bedeutet, dass mehrere starke Mächte beteiligt seien. Wie begann der Krieg? Die Spannung zwischen den Ländern und in den Ländern staute sich an. Dann als Zündfunke war der Attentat auf den österreichischen Thronfolger Franz Ferdinand in Sarajevo. Der Blankoscheck von Österreich für Serbien, der die 24 Stunden Frist beinhaltete, führte dazu, dass sich Deutschland Österreich verpflichtete und Sowjetrussland Serbien. Nach der Kriegserklärung Deutschlands war es offiziell. Deutschland marschierte nach Frankreich durch Belgien, was den Eintritt England zur Folge hatte. USA, welches sich noch zurückhaltete, trat aufgrund des uneingeschränkten U-Boot-Kriegs ein. Außerdem war dieser Krieg ein moderner Krieg durch die neuen Waffen, zum Beispiel das Gas, welches eingesetzt wurde. Der Weltkrieg wurde durch Kriegspropaganda vorangeführt. Jedes Land war in Euphorie der Kriegsbegeisterung verfallen. Jedoch nahm die Kriegsbegeisterung durch die Nöte von Jahr zu Jahr ab. Die Fronten kämpften und die Soldaten fielen. Die Heimatfront war nun daran zu kämpfen. Kampf um ihr eigenes Dasein. Hungernöte und Materialmangel war Alltag. Die Frauen übernahmen die harte Männerarbeit zu Hause und ihre Männer kämpften oder kamen zurück. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, translation.
French.
All in all, it was World War One.
Maybe. Do you want the translation?
Would I know what to write here?
Perhaps you can translate.
I might have pauses.
Do you want really?
I can
because
If you want to do it, go
my
ahead.
hand type is very awful.
We'll see. Give it a go. I might not understand the word, so we'll go. So, the First World so the First World War was a war about power. You wanted hegemonia.
Yes,
Imperial. It was in power through political imperialism. Platz an der Sonne. Oh, so a place in the sun was a quote.
yes, we'll have
Colonial one died.
Okay. Through the imperialism and colonialism rose the Drang. Also the power and the nationalism, the nationalistic thinking was very important. The was sagt das Wort?
Actor.
Akteur. Ja, was?
Actor.
Someone who actor.
Oh, okay. So the actors in the World War, they mean the more modern powers. So the more modern technology meant there was more deaths. Okay, that's one time. Important actors are the.
It's not important, I say this.
Okay, so were the big players like the USA, France, Germany, all of Europe. Okay, so where do you want me to start again?
The attentat of Sarajevo and then they can say this.
Okay.
The blanket check.
Oh no.
I think that's okay.
After the World War was declared, Germany's war, Germany made war official. So they marched through France, through Belgium,
To France,
to France, through Belgium, and entered England's.
England was then in the
End
war.
of the war, yeah.
Oh, so okay, at the end of the war. The USA,
Because of the uneingeschränkter U-Boot-Krieg.
Okay, so the war, the fighting with the U-boats.
Yes.
With the U-boats. Okay, so that's that bit. Right, where do I start at the top again? Right, okay. Apart from this was the war with apart from this, it was a modern war during the new artillery was being used, like gas, which was implicated Okay, so the what's that say? World War would through propaganda, war propaganda, propelled every land in Europe in the Kriegsbegeisterung.
More enthusiasm.
Oh, so they had the enthusiasm through the war was spread through the war propaganda. Okay, so things like hunger got spread, and every year to year it got worse. The fronts where they were fighting and the soldiers that fell. The home fronts were so the fighting happened at the home front? Okay, so the people at the home fronts also felt the need to fight for their own lives. A propeller of this was the famine, Materialmangel.
Ja, das ist keine Lebensmittel.
Okay, so that they didn't even have basic things to live off. The French took over
the woman.
Oh, okay. Oh, right. Oh, the farm. And the women took over the manual labour at home because the men were out fighting and they never came back. Sorry, that was a very bad translation.
My handwriting is really awful.
I hope that makes sense.
Is there one group more? No. We had 4 groups, I think. And what do you think? Are these narrations better than the other narrations? As the narrations you got by your history lessons?
I mean, it's quite hard. Like, again, I think even though we are still very heavily talking about kind of the trench warfare, I mean, we're not really mentioning about the other side of Europe, like with Russian kind of influence at all in any of these. Nobody's mentioned about like the Russian side of the war, which is still quite important in the European aspect. So I think that's something that ought to be included as well, perhaps.
There is also an element, you can't know everything. There's always more to learn. Yes, everything happened, but we as humans, we can't retain everything. So maybe not having the whole European history and simply developing through meeting new people and things like this is a way for us to learn and progress and actually to help build new relationships and moving forward by not knowing, to then share the knowledge of curiosity. So I'm not saying to ignore it, but to develop on these ways of learning, perhaps. Because a whole European history is, it almost seems unattainable.
Now you speak about the problems you had to create a story.
I'm sorry.
What I ask, are these stories better than the first stories?
Well, yeah,
We-
certainly. I think because it combined the aspects that we had in the individual stories where, I don't know, where the focus was on facts and on the other one it was more on the emotional part, on how the population felt. I think that's actually, all of these were a good combination of both from all perspectives.
I think it's a bit more effective if you really want to demotivate people from actually starting your war, to have the whole European perspective, because in my opinion you learn that for every participant, at least for the European participants, everyone was a loser, even if you ended up on the winning side. So if you just take the German perspective, then you might say, well, if you just win this war, then that might be a good thing. But if you have like the whole European perspective, you see that there's actually no going back to winning any war once you started it.
Nobody who disagrees to you.
I think it's a very good point because, like, for instance, for French, where they they won the war, yes, but in terms of their manpower, the economy, and same with the British economy just completely collapsed after the war, and it just led to like just a hard life for everyone, even though we were technically on the winning side.
Sure. I also think that's one of the most important points in general, that if you look at the war, or wars in general, from a European perspective, you cannot have a winner because someone's always going to lose. In a collective European perspective, it's always just destruction of the station. Well, if you have a single nation, single nation's perspective on the war, you might say, well, yeah, we won or we lost, and that's good or bad. Well, if you really only take the European, the entire perspective, it's just a war. It's terrible. And I think that's the right way to view it. I think.
Is another message.
Yeah.
And this is a message we agree to all, I think. It's not good. War isn't good. Do we need the reflection on the past to consider about the awfulness of wars?
Yeah, it's the nearest example. People, I mean, if you had, I think a great deal of the war enthusiasm in all countries was that they didn't really have a war that affected them personally. They had smaller colonial wars on the other end of the world and all the likes. They didn't really have a picture, an image on what a European war between great powers would mean. And I think that's always the danger, that we simply forget the suffering and pain and only see the glory, so to say. So yeah, of course, reflection on history is extremely important if we want to keep peace modern times too.
I think World War I is overshadowed by World War II, especially I would say from a British perspective, because of what happened in World War II, like the Holocaust and that kind of thing. If you look at like a war that's kind of just evil really, we would just see like World War II, and because World War I happened before World War II, you kind of just like, yeah, it was just like a war, kind of a precursor to World War II. Whereas actually, if what had happened after World War I was done in a kind of sustainable manner, which allowed Germany to recover without that kind of animosity, things could have turned out quite a bit more differently.
Once more the question, which narrations were better? So narrations you learned in school about World War I, or the narrations you created by discuss the national perspectives, I think, in the groups?
The narrations we made together, in theory, even if we went on to change them and finesse them, I think they have elements of all of it in. They have elements of what we learned at school, because that's what our knowledge is, and contextual of what we learned from our families maybe even. So in a way, they are all the same, just put together in a more appreciative fashion of each other's point. So sharing the fact that we lost people, sharing the fact that it was a loss and that no one really only won. Everyone had personal victories and personal losses. And this European history of World War I we've created is a mutual, I feel like, respect, maybe without the animosity, so because we understand the devastation from both sides. And I think the European was more balanced because we have all the facts and emotions from all sides coming together.
Mm-hmm. But I missed something in these narrations. Whereas you say you shared knowledge, of course. The knowledge you earned by learning history in schools, for example, in other spaces. But what is the evidence of this World War I?
Evidence.
So, or the important? What makes it important?
Evidence. So,
No.
Yeah.
What is the
was hinterlassen ist.
Yeah.
Was immer noch da ist.
Yeah.
It's just collective suffering for what was ultimately a pointless cause. It was just a kind of a chain reaction which just happened so quickly, and everyone just got like swept up, and you just had random people just going to fight a war which could have not have occurred.
And there's evidence, even none of us are from big cities where there are massive museums about this. So for us to know this hasn't just come from the education system, it's come from the pain that is everywhere. Everyone has relations who have at least, even if they're from somewhere that wasn't even involved in Europe, they at least have an association with it that they've brought to their small town. The pain and suffering is everywhere, and yes, we have materialistic evidence, we have journals and poetry and all this, but the pain that everyone has suffered is what's there. That's the worst evidence, but the most true and raw evidence. That's maybe what's corrupted our education systems to be so opinionated about our nations. But the pain that we see, that when we see all these artifacts, that's what we associate it with. And the evidence that we see from the people around us is the most impactful and poignant thing we all have access to.
But to show this pain, I think you had one way, or you choose one way to show it by personalization, because you had the report of one who would take part in your account.
You talk about environmental impact.
Yes, of course.
Yeah. And can you repeat the question?
No, it's a general question. You wrote narrations about World War II, and what is the message of your narration? Only to show pain, only to show that war is not the way we should interact. It's a very abstract value, I think. But why it is important to tell stories about World War I today?
If we forget, then it will happen again. If less is mentioned, then we have a little less knowledge. The next generation has just a little less knowledge. And we all know war is bad. As humans, we don't want to lose. And we all lost.
There was a second World War after the First World War.
And
the people didn't learn.
But we're people, we make mistakes. We're blinded by our opinions and what we want to see. And that is nationalism, essentially. If we only see the amazing France, or the solid German, or the imperialised England, that's what we'll see. And then we'll make mistakes. And through your European, or I can't think of the word, European history, this may be declouding each other's visions, what we need.
But what are the results of this First World War for the development of history after 1918? I think the first group mentioned the process of the integration of Europe. First or second, I cannot remember. What are the results?
The results of what?
Not reasons, the results of this First World War, or the effects for the development of history of the yes.
So the results of the First World War is the Second World War.
So simple.
I think also adding on to that, it'd probably be the way it was written down would have again been very much like, this is our story, this is their story kind of thing, and we were right, we won. Whereas I think after World War II, the way the history was written out was much more balanced, should we say, in terms of like actually understanding why people went to war in the first place. It was just generally better done after the Second World War than the first one. I think the first one was still like, yeah, we won, we were great kind of thing. Whereas the Second World War was, yeah, we won, but it's sad that we went to war in the first place.
And what is the conclusion of our adventure, you could say, in this afternoon? Do we need a European history of World War I or II? Or is it one story about these two wars? What shall be the story we will tell today and will give to our children in the future?
It's important to keep not a contract but a link with other country to avoid to restart something like that. To keep some, like today, to speak about this, to not just to remind, but to keep the link and to say, okay, now we are not brothers, but we are together, and we all go to the same direction now. And I think in European it's important to know that now we are together and we will not do this mistake again. Because we are here today to speak about, we are here today to speak to our children and to keep this in our mind. I think it's important.
Okay. Perhaps we don't need one story, one narration about World War I, but we have to discuss about it.
Yeah,
discuss national perspectives and so on. And we have to keep or have to
our story, home story.
Home story?
Home.
Home story.
Your own story.
Yeah.
We have to deal with our narrations, national narrations, and so on, and we don't need one story about World War II.
But maybe
we have to make a dialogue.
Yeah, but we can make. I think it's possible to make a story that not it's a story with everything in a global way, but something like one story for everybody, but a story which speak about each point of view. I think.
Many stories, some stories, and we have to discuss about the stories.
Yeah.
I think that is a good last sentence for this afternoon.